What's up everybody and welcome to another edition of AGR's Pop Culture Reviews. Now before I start this review, I want to say how thankful I am for all the crews who came from all over the United States to help us out in Florida to restore our power. It's the reason why AGR's Pop Culture Reviews is back on and the reviews keep coming. I also want to thank the sponsors and all of the partners for being very patient during this somewhat tumultuous time. But I know that I'm backed up. I will get all the reviews out this weekend because I got a lot of stuff to review. Now, as you guys know, I'm a really big proponent of Destiny. It's a game that I really wanted to see succeed. Now, of course, it did trip up a little bit with the initial installment, but it doesn't mean that it didn't have a great foundation. And today we're going to be taking a look at Destiny 2 to see if it lived up to some of the expectations and maybe fix some of the problems that it had from the original version. Now, one of the things that I already find pretty cool about this game, especially in the introductory credits, is that they give you kind of a tour of everything that you've done in the original game. They present you with these beautiful images, almost like calligraphy, of all the campaigns you had been on. I especially like that they take you back to the Taken King, the House of Wolves, and most interestingly, they actually give you a date when you participated in these campaigns, which is really freaking awesome and endeared me very much to the beginning sequences of this game. Now, again, granted, much of the criticism from the DLC with these campaigns that you went on was that it was merely incremental updates, something that should have been included in the game, and one of the main criticisms is that the original title had no narrative. And at this point, that is a very fair criticism. I do have to give it to Bungie this time around though. In terms of uploading your character, it wasn't a pain in the ass, it was very seamless, and I have to say, it really uplifted me to see my character or avatar again upload in this new title so easily. There it is, Raudeza, and I couldn't wait to start. To say that I've been anticipating the release of this game would be an incredible understatement, so let's take a closer look at Destiny 2. Now, let's face it guys, the original Destiny was an incredible first-person shooter in terms of mechanics and overall fun. I mean, it just felt so good. But what it was really missing was heart. It had none. It was so blank. I mean, you couldn't even tell me anything about the story, anything about the narrative. It was all kind of cryptic, and it just felt flat. Fortunately, that's not the case here, and Bungie really listened to their fans in terms of wanting to tell a pretty good story. I'm not going to release any spoilers, of course, but I will say, guys, it's pretty satisfying that we actually have a workable freaking narrative this time. Now, I also have to preface something. I'm a very huge fan of the show Firefly. I don't know why it was canceled, but anything with Nathan Fillion in it, you know is going to be freaking amazing. And that really lends us into a very interesting topic, because this one, or this version of Destiny, also has a lot of great characters, memorable ones. You know, by contrast, the first one, what the hell? All you had is your little Dinglebot, and that was really the only form of communication that you had. And occasionally you would get a backstory, which was completely ubiquitous. I mean, it happened all the time. But here, we have actual characters that we care about, and they're very interesting. So, props to Bungie on that one. Now, one of the criticisms that I had with the original Destiny game is that I didn't get a sense of urgency. I didn't feel like anything was at stake. I knew that the Traveler was there and he resurrected me for some reason, but it didn't seem like that reason was very important. I mean, sure, my little Dinglebot, voiced by Peter Dinklage or Tyrion Lannister, told me that it was important, but I never knew why the fudge it was. This time around, however, there's an incredible sense of urgency. Essentially, the Darkness has come back along with the Fallen and the Cabal to launch an assault on the Traveler. And let me tell you something, guys, shit gets real very quick. I mean, the opening sequence of this game is incredible. I will say this, Destiny 2 is not screwing around, and at the beginning of the game they set a very important tone about the sense of urgency and the real threat that the Guardians now face. Now, the visuals in this game do look pretty good, and it at least meets the same standards as its predecessor. I didn't see too many dips in frame rate, it actually runs pretty smoothly. But if you're looking for a kind of visual revamping of this game, that's not exactly what happened here. It is kind of an incremental upgrade, but I am running this on the PlayStation Pro, so that might account for the boost in the graphics. I think what is probably the most impressive thing about this title so far is in the overall art design. I think they went for a little bit more gritty, grimy look to it, and it works very well. It makes everything look a little bit more photorealistic. I also have to mention that there is a sense of scale in this game in terms of the overall set pieces. Things feel a lot bigger than it did in the original universe, and that's a good thing. Now, the very beginning of this game, one of the first stages, is incredibly invigorating. Though, it did give me pause because you guys know some of the criticisms that most people had was that you had these kind of like horde mode when you were doing the missions. Basically, your Dinglebot would fiddle around with a piece of machinery or a computer to try to get access to the next point or to the next section, and you would basically have to fight off waves and waves of enemies. Now, the initial battle basically just repeats that, and I was a little bit worried to thinking that holy shit, they're doing it again. But that's not exactly what happened, and that was very refreshing. And it's nice to see that you have other players around that were going through the same combat, something that you really didn't see in the initial stages before. It's actually pretty cool. The other thing I do have to compliment Bungie on this time around as well is definitely in the cutscenes. Not only do they look spectacular, but they give you a sense of being and a sense of yourself. You finally get to see your avatar a lot more than you did in the previous game. Also, this game is so thematic. I mean, it just looks beautiful. It's wonderful to see this universe, and especially to actually see you in it, the character that you've created. So I gotta give props for that. That's really awesome that they did this. Also, what these cutscenes provide is something that's been successful in very other famous titles, that they provide you with a way of giving you exposition without it being boring and characters having to go on in freaking lines and lines of dialogue. They don't do that here, and it does give you a sense of what's going on in this universe, you know? They say the best thing to do in storytelling is show, don't tell, and this is exactly what these scenes do, and I think they work very effectively. So if I had to characterize this game in the Star Wars universe, I would say that this second act is a lot similar to The Empire Strikes Back. Essentially, the darkness has dealt a very big blow to the Guardians in that they've essentially taken their light, which is the source of all the Guardians' power, and that's a very big problem for them. From a narrative standpoint, it was also very interesting to see some of the Guardians lamenting the fact that they no longer have these kind of superhuman abilities. You have to remember, when the Traveler first came, it allowed basically humans to open up the doors to the stars, and it extended human life by 300 years. A whole lot of technological advances came when the Traveler came, and you know, now that they don't have it, it's kind of a thing. Now, I mentioned this before, but I think it's important to actually kind of dwell on it just a little bit. The sense of art direction here and the tone is very important. This is unlike the previous game where it was just kind of a first-person shooter and didn't really have any meat to it in terms of overall story. But I think that this game saturated itself, or at least Bungie did, in terms of heart, and the tone is perfect. It allows you enough time to relax and really explore this world. It is magnificent to look at, and because the sense of scale has been greatly improved, it is going to engross you a lot, guys. Really flushing out this world, though, is the fact that the locations are a lot more varied than the previous game as well. You can be on these gargantuan giant snowy peaks at one point, and then these beautiful vistas of forests and little brooks. I mean, it's just spectacular. They did a really good job in making sure that they provided you enough variety to make sure that this world, or at least you feel like this world, is alive. Now, I'm sure as you figured out by now, the tower that you originally used as your central hub has been pretty much decimated, so basically you've had to go with the resistance fighters that are still left on Earth, that are not Guardians and don't have any power, as a source of your central hub. This central hub is now known as the farm, and is essentially used for the same purpose as it was in the previous game, where you upgrade weapons and ammo, turn in anagrams, and find out a little bit about the world. You can also get new missions as they come along, and you can also get your mail, so this is essentially your new spot. Now, those of you who played the original Destiny, you'll be very familiar with the RPG and upgrade elements to your character here. Now, one of the things I did notice in terms of the overall loot drops is before they were frustrating as hell in terms of the randomness of some of the items that you would get. It downright pissed people off, and I know a couple of people that basically didn't play Destiny anymore because it was such a problem. They've limited that a little bit, so sometimes you'll get certain things, especially in a helmet or a piece of armor that you like, and it won't go to the detriment of your light meter, which really freaking sucked. I can't tell you how many times I personally experienced the fact that I really liked the design of my character, but I had to take off and put on a hideous piece of armor because it increased my light meter, which freaking sucked. I also have to say there have been some improvements to the combat, and especially to the AI. I don't know, it seems a lot more refined, and I gotta tell you, you have to be very careful with these enemy AIs. They are not stupid, not that they were before, but I think they have been much more improved in terms of their algorithm for how they fight you back. They're a lot more strategic. In that sense, you can't just go running and gunning in this game. I think you have to use a lot more strategy than you had to in the previous title. I also have to remark on the fact that missions are a lot more interesting. Rather than just going to some spot and retrieving some signal, or somebody giving you orders over your comms of what to do next, there are actually some interactions with some pretty cool characters that tell you that they need help, especially in terms of the resistance fighters, and I thought that was a very unique change and actually very refreshing because it really changes up the formula a little bit and it never feels stale. I also like the fact that they weren't merely caricatures of themselves, and each one of these characters that you encounter have their own unique backstory in their own right, which is also something that's very welcome. However, not everything is perfect and no game can be. But I will have to say I do actually question a couple of design changes in Destiny 2. One of them being the obvious, and I'm sure you guys are frustrated about this as well, is the fact that you don't get a Sparrow right away. I mean, what the freak happened with that? Why the hell didn't we get one from the outset? It leads to some very frustrating encounters when you're trying to help other people out, especially when you're frantically trying to get to a heroic event. These things just happen randomly and you can join other Guardians to help them in the fight with these random events. But it's a pain in the ass when everybody's already at that location and you're struggling to get by, practically moving like a freaking snail to help out your teammates, which really is frustrating as shit. Now, I'm not sure if this is something that happened in the original Destiny, because it seemed like it was a lot smaller in terms of the missions, but I have noticed that cooperative gameplay is a lot more intuitive, and your squad mates are, in fact, using a lot more strategy to take down these enemies, which is cool. And one thing I do have to say that I really love about this is definitely your power-up abilities. There's a lot more variety. I mean, you could be a warlock and you can use like force powers in order to take down enemies, or my personal favorite, this staff that looks like a freaking lightsaber to gouge the shit out of these enemies. It is freaking awesome. The main campaign clocks in at about 8 or 9 hours depending how fast you get through them, but if you're done with the campaign, you also have the online multiplayer component, which I think is a lot more well balanced now. Yes, I still got an occasional one-hit kill, which really pissed me off, but overall, they've kind of cleaned up some of those issues they had before. And then you also have the raids and the daily strikes and all that kind of great stuff. So there's a lot of value here in terms of going back to Destiny and replaying it. So a lot of replay value here, guys. Overall, guys, I have to say that I'm very impressed with Destiny 2. Some can argue that this was the game that we should have gotten from the beginning, and that is a legitimate argument, but most importantly is the fact that Bungie really listened to their fans and made several changes that were sorely needed to the original Destiny title and just ported them over here. This is a great progression, and I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. As I mentioned before, I know this game had a lot of potential, and it looks like it's starting to live up to it, guys. Alright everybody, so that's my official review of Destiny 2. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews.